Dr. Sheehan is well grounded in this area. I'm sure most of you are familiar with him in some way or another. He's a lecturer, he's an author, he's written a number of articles and books on running. He's a multi-marathoner, cardiologist, and we believe that he has some interesting insights into the area of health and particularly the mind-body connection. So let me turn it over to Dr. Sheehan.
I think I'll try without the microphone. There's a kind of an eerie thing. It's like that sound's coming from behind us, not from me. You notice when Gary was talking, it sounded like he was lip syncing. This talk evolved out of an experience I had about 3 weeks ago. I had to go where my son is a resident, and he had scheduled me in for grand rounds. That's one way you get taught. If you send your kid to medical school, and when he gets to be a resident, he suggests to the chief that he knows a guy that needs a gate doing grand rounds. So I got there a little early, and I was sitting in the room thinking, why in the world would these people come and listen to me? And if they did, how could I present the topic so that they would then consider the possibility of learning this stuff? I mean, why would a doctor want to learn about exercise physiology? And I think most of them are asking that question, and perhaps you're asking, I don't know why you're here actually. Because by and large, we have never seen the need to learn anything about exercise. And my son Peter, who is 2 years out of downstate, and if you graduate from downstate, you get a degree, and you pass your board and practice. That those wizards, the people that give the board examinations, as well as those that have taught my son, have seen no need that 4 years should contain anything about exercise. And I would take that to be the general rule in the education of a physician, that exercise physiology is a neglected subject. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's true that one Canadian surveyed American medical schools and found that the average medical school, this was within the last 4 years, spent 4 hours out of the 4-year curriculum on the effect of exercise on the body. So I think it would be generally assumed the doctor, either from tradition or from the example that they received in medical school, that sees no need for this. And even now, I think I can assume it to be true that most physicians look on fitness as a media event. It's something that goes on newspapers and TV, but it is not applicable to real life, as so much that happens on TV and newspapers have nothing to do with real life, neither does fitness. Then why should we do it? Why should we as physicians consider learning exercise physiology? And I think there are 4 reasons. 2 of them, really 2 divisions. The first 2 reasons that I present on the board are really a matter of practicality. The physician should learn about exercise physiology because, like it or not, people are exercising. And therefore, they're going to come to the physician's office and present problems for the physician which he will or she will not be able to handle unless you understand what actually happens with exercise. And the first thing would be, in just a simple examination of an exercising individual, you're going to find out there's an entirely new set of normals. And that what you would consider abnormal is perfectly normal for someone who runs 30 or 40 miles a week, which is certainly being done with more and more frequency. So the chance of seeing an individual, a completely fit individual, now comes into the picture. That someone will come to the office. It's similar in a way to a veterinarian who, instead of treating a domesticated cat, now sees a wildcat according to the office, or a hare. The difference between a hare and a rabbit. I don't know veterinarians see these different kinds of animals, but when a runner comes into the office, you are seeing a wild animal. And that wild animal now is going to present different findings in all the systems than you would ordinarily expect from a domesticated, sedentary TV watcher. And what are those? Those are the things you would have to know. I mean, the heart side, what happens to the heart? If you did a profile of the ordinary runner, what would you find? Well, you would find that the ordinary runner looks somewhat emaciated, cachectic, underfed, and in need of nourishment. Because what happens is that most runners go back to the percent body fat they had when they were in their teens. And when you get to people that are really earnest about their running, that percent body fat might be down to 5 or 6%. Well, most physicians don't see people who are 5 or 6% body fat unless they have bulimics. So you have to know that that's going to happen. The first thing that happens is the percent body fat goes down. Then the major things that occur after that occur in the heart, circulation, and in the muscle cell. The heart enlarges so that the cardiac thoracic ratio increases. The largest parts that have been reported in literature are those in professional cyclists. But cross-country skiers and cross-country runners have large hearts. Now, when you get down to doing the echo on these people, however, you're going to find there's a difference in the various sports. For instance, weightlifters, and there are a lot of people now that are closet weightlifters and are getting involved in nautilus, things like that. You know, very weird things going on out there. There's a whole group, and in fact there are schismatic groups here. There are free weight people who frown on anybody that would be seen with a nautilus or a universal or any of these other things. And because free weights is an art form, required balance. If you don't know anything about muscles, you can get into a nautilus machine for 20 minutes and you'll get developed and train a specific muscle. But if you're going to get into free weights, you've got to spend months learning how to do these things. So naturally, those people feel that these other people are peasants. Peasants. But at the same time, well, not to get into all this weightlifting arcania, what happens when you weightlift or shot put or do things that require grunting and Valsalva type movements, what you do then is you develop a systolic heart. Whereas endurance athletes like swimmers and cross-country skiers and runners develop diastolic hearts. And what the difference primarily is not in the size. The size will look the same when you do your cardiac thoracic ratio. When you do the echoes, though, you're going to find a completely different story. The thickness of the wall in the systolic shot putter and weightlifter is increased. The chamber size is not. So that the cardiac output, the cardiac capacity is not changed. The opposite occurs in the diastolic endurance heart, where the chamber is enormous, and the width of the thickness of the wall is only minimally increased. So what we have then is a capacious, filling heart that ejects gallons and gallons of blood. So in addition, because of that, we begin to hear murmurs, third heart sound, fourth heart. So, see it? So that an examination of an endurance athlete, you're going to find an enlarged heart with extra sounds that you'll have difficulty interpreting. At the same time, you're going to get changes on the electrocardiogram, so that you begin to get incomplete right heart block, you get right heart block, you may even get left bundle branch block. You get lengthening of the PR interval, IV conduction disturbances, and then you get into rhythm disturbances. Now, in one Israeli study of soccer players, the technician inadvertently left this soccer player lying on the examining table for 45 minutes awaiting his EKG. One thing about athletes is they never get impatient. Given the opportunity to lie on the table, an athlete will seize it. That's the last thing they would worry about is waiting for something to happen. Because
Well, what occurred then was that when they did the cardiogram, they found he was in a wanky body. And subsequently, they found that if they let people sit around and lie down there for 45 minutes, they discovered all kinds of disturbances that they were not aware of initially. So that a wanky bach is not unusual in a seriously trained athlete. I had a fellow come up from Washington, a Marine captain, who was denied admission to the Marine Marathon because he had a wanky bach. This guy comes walking in looking like John Wayne after maybe 9 months in overseas training. And there was absolutely nothing the matter with him except he had a wanky bach. So I asked him about his training. So he said, well, I run twice a day. He said, I run at lunch hour with a couple other Marines, and then I do a leisurely 10. So I do 6 for lunch, and I do a leisurely 10 along whatever that Rock Creek Park is or something. So I said, well, what about this lunch hour run that you and the other 2 Marines take? I said, do you talk during the run? Could you talk with these other 2 lads when you run? He said, well, I might be able to manage a yes or a no. This guy was racing 6 miles every lunch hour and then running 10 at night. I mean, he was in such superb shape. He had reduced for whatever reason these arrhythmias occur, whether it's some problem, it's some accentuating the parasympathetic system over the sympathetic, whatever it is, you get these rhythms, and they'll go into junctional rhythms, and the P wave disappears somewhere. See? And of course, this is extremely alarming to somebody who has never seen a guy that races 6 miles for lunch hour and then runs 10 at night to kind of relax. The mileage that these people put in once they get into this thing is sometimes incomprehensible. One of my good friends is a fellow named Noel Carroll, who ran at Villanova and he's an Olympian. And when I went over to Ireland, I ran with Noel, and what he does, his main workouts are these, what he calls in and out 200 meters. And he's 42 years old, and he can take anybody in your acquaintance and destroy them doing these in and out 200 meters. I went out there, and he was running with these college kids, and they were just lying around like fish out of water. I was running every 3rd one. That's one of my flaws. In addition to that, then he goes out, he lives in Wicklow, and he goes out on these Wicklow hills and does all kinds of mileage. Well, the second time I went, I only saw him briefly the first time. The second time I went, he said I should have come down to Trinity College at lunch hour. And it turned out that for 17 years, Monday through Friday, he has never missed a day running an hour on this grass track at Trinity College. But he never mentions it. He said, I don't consider that training. That's a reward. So here's an extra hour then. I'm wasting time here. Well, what I'm saying is, we have not, you see, here you've got all these abnormalities as far as, these are normal abnormalities as far as the heart, not to speak of repolarization variants, T-wave inversions. So the EKG of a distance runner is something that has to be approached with great caution. Now, in addition to that, see, if you have the misfortune of ordering a profile on this runner, you're going to find out that hardly anything is normal. The hemoglobin may be as low as 12 grams, and hematocrit may be under 40, and you know, in a male, that's a very disturbing finding. But that may well be the dilution type of anemia that you see with runners. Because when you run and you train severely, the blood volume goes up. The hemoglobin also goes up, but not as much. So that when you do a fingertip blood, you're going to find out that the hematocrit may well be under 40. If you do blood volume studies, but how many times are you going to do blood volume studies? You're going to find out that actually the hemoglobin mass is larger than yours. So that's the first thing. You're going to find out that all the muscle enzymes are high, and now we know that you can get the brain enzymes and the cardiac enzymes elevated. without any apparent damage in either area. The uric acid is generally lower. Well, I don't understand why that should be. I always felt that gout occurred from such stressful incidents. But the uric acid is going to be low, the cholesterol is going to be down. And of course, Peter Wood has written extensively on the lipid profiles of runners of 30 and 40 mile a week runners, and disclosed the fact that they have the lipid profile of a young female, which is about the best you can do. And the high density lipids will be up, the triglycerides will be down, the cholesterol will be down. If you also do a urine immediately or within proximity to running, you're going to find red cells, you're going to find protein, and sometimes in fairly high quantities. Red cells have been reported in quantities that I have figured out could make you anemic if you had that on a daily basis. So these are the findings. That would be, say, the physical profile of an exercising individual. The physiological profile we've described to an extent. But what we don't realize, I think, is that the enormous changes that take place in the muscle cell. Actually, the effect of exercise on the body, as far as physical work capacity, is almost totally in the periphery. In the muscle, the heart is a muscle that partakes of this, but generally the effect of training on the body, as far as the heart is concerned, takes place almost entirely in the first 3 months. After that, what is occurring is primarily in muscle. And we didn't understand this or know this until about 1968, when they started sticking needles in muscle and doing biopsies. So we can be excused for not doing it. But actually what is occurring, and the whole basis of training, is that at the muscle level, the capillaries increase, the hemoglobin, the myoglobin in the muscle increases, the mitochondria enlarge, and the enzymes increase. And so that the individual muscle cell therefore is presented with more oxygen through the capillaries, even though the cardiac output does not increase and the pulmonary function doesn't change. The individual cell is presented, because this is 300 or 400% increase in capillary density to the muscle cell. The myoglobin allows that oxygen to diffuse, the mitochondria takes it up, and the metabolism of your fat and carbohydrates are all improved through the enzymes. So here, in this muscle cell, is where the major effect of exercise is taking place. And when we talk about cardiorespiratory endurance, we shouldn't be saying that, because we're actually diverting our attention from where the good effect is occurring. It's that one of our problems with the understanding of exercise physiology is this kind of focus on the heart and the lungs. Now, that's, so as a cardiologist, I like that. I mean, you're in my field, but actually, it's a misnomer to think of aerobic as having to do with the heart and lungs. That aerobic metabolism is taking place in the muscle. But every time I think aerobic means air going into the lungs. So when we train, obviously our aerobic metabolism improves because our lungs are getting better, whereas lungs don't get better. When I was in medical school and I wasn't running at all, I had the largest vital capacity and the second largest in my class. I remember that. But so when you start running, your pulmonary function doesn't change. And similarly with patients, as we're going to show. So you've got to keep this in mind, that the major effect of training is in the periphery, not in the heart and lungs. As a matter of fact, Ezra Amsterdam had an editorial or an article in the American Heart Journal, I think last July, where she said there is no definitive evidence that there is a training effect on the diseased heart. And then Victor Froelich, the month before, said there's no definitive evidence there's any primary, secondary, or tertiary prevention of heart disease through exercise. What we're going to deal with is what we can prove. We can prove this. We can prove
function through the testing, but we can prove this by muscle biopsies or anything else we want to do. So I think what we have to do then, I don't want to go into the psychological, although I'm sure every one of you has seen that recent article about obligatory runners having a personality disorder similar to women with anorexia nervosa. I mean, that kind of nonsense is what results from having psychiatrists attempt to treat normal people. Garfield Duncan, I don't know if you know, Garfield Duncan wrote the book on metabolism. He was a Philadelphia physician. I find that people from Philadelphia or Boston tend to be themselves and they make their own, they have their own ideas about things. Joslin was one, of course. You know, they're kind of unreconstructed guys. And he had this absolute disregard for psychiatrists. You know, you have to be a big man to be. Most doctors don't do that. They're very tolerant of the other specialists. They're afraid they might know something. Anyway, Duncan one time said, there are only two functions for psychiatrists. He had said some poor woman who had got some 70-year-old woman who had been taken through a complete sex history and came back to fall. Anyway, in Philadelphia don't do that. Anyway, Duncan said only two things that psychiatrists should do. One, they should teach us psychiatry, and they should treat people with whom it is impossible to reason. So that's reading, I guess, anyway, I didn't accept what Duncan was. But anyway, I'll probably talk about that tonight, because I think that's a fascinating study. It's surprising, you see, that this happened in Tucson. Those people in Tucson found these 60 obligatory runners who were on a path of self-destruction, where the group in Tempe had reported on 800 runners who found life and living in salvation. You know, it's only 90 miles away. So the first thing that is the reason you have to learn exercise physiology is because you're going to look stupid. I mean, if you're going to examine a patient who is a runner and then tell them that some of my runners have been told that they have near fatal liver kidney disease and part of a 70-year-old alcoholic. And that's what these tests are going to suggest, that there's liver and renal disease here or cardiac disease, none of which of course is present. Now the second thing is that because these people, these people with this potentially fatal event for self-destruction are going to insist on continuing doing it, they're going to develop all kinds of diseases which you've got to learn about. And there are. You can start from here. There's effort headache, there's exercise-induced asthma, there's the problem of people with mitral valve prolapse and other arrhythmias, and of course these rhythm disturbances I described occurring because of or enhanced by running. And then you have exercise-induced diarrhea. Runner's diarrhea has become a major problem, a major unanswered problem. There's runner's itch, and then from then on, any number of musculoskeletal problems. So you have these, I call it diseases of excellence. And all I can say about this, I don't know how we erase this. You don't have to remember that. Oh, there'll be no test. All I can say about this is that most runners, and you really put on your best behavior here, because there's a couple of things they can do. They can stop running. I mean, suppose you have this, and that's unfortunately what most doctors say. Well, why don't you stop running? Well, they won't stop running. That means if you say that, they're going to see somebody else. All right. Then they can ignore the symptoms. Now that's why these people in Tucson think they're nuts, because they do ignore the symptom. And the reason they're ignoring the symptom is because they've been told to stop running. And the third thing is you can give them medicine. because one, like these mitral valve prolapse women and hypertensives are put on beta blockers. And you've got to know about beta blockers. I have runners that could run 10 miles a day. They're put on beta blockers and they have trouble going around a 4-mile track. Beta blocker now, it's like every other medication. You give somebody an antihistamine and they fall asleep. I mean, 5 minutes after they've ingested and it doesn't affect anybody else. So it's not true that everybody can't handle beta blocker, but you got to think a long time before you give somebody beta blockers. And you know, all medicines are poisons. You don't know until you start taking your own medicine that they're poisons. You can't realize how many reactions they have. So nobody wants to take medicine, and especially since now it develops that they have to take it before they run, because otherwise how are they going to get rid of runner's itch, runner's headache, runner's diarrhea, exercise-induced asthma, and all the rest. So what's the alternative? Chiropractic? Could be. I mean, the best thing about chiropractic is they can't write a prescription. Well, I think they got to think. That means they got to think. Suppose instead of no smoking day, we had one day a year where the doctors couldn't give out prescriptions. Imagine how much thinking would be going on, how many fuses would be blowing up. Okay, so now you're faced with treating this person without giving them medicine. Wow. Well, that's brought me back to allergies. I mean, what we're dealing now is really lifestyle medicine, and that means you've got to get down and dig in and try to adjust this runner to this now present problem. And I think that what we're finding with the runners is how important allergy is. Now, I'm not going to say that this is allergy. I'm calling it allergy for a better word. It's a food intolerance. The allergist will say the tests are all negative, so it can't be allergy. Well, that's just using a word that we like to use, meaning that when I take this food, I get a terrible reaction. Is that allergy? I don't know. I mean, I like to call it, allergy is one easy way to call it, but it's food intolerance. And now we're finding in runners that when you get into high metabolic activity, previously latent food intolerances become evident. And so, like with migraine, people say, well, there's no food allergy connected with migraine, but all of us know people that all they have to do is lick a spoon of chocolate on it, and half hour later go up in their room with cold towels and the shades going, and everybody in the house been warned not to go up and see what's the matter with mother. See? So what happens in running when this high metabolic activity, you begin to get diarrhea from trouble with, say, lactase intolerance. We know that, for instance, that half the people that populate the globe can't drink milk. They have to have it changed in some way. Now, lots of times until you start running 5 miles a day, you don't know this. You're not aware of it. When a runner starts out in the morning and gets halfway through a running session and has to stop and go to the bathroom, then, and this happens more often than you suspect, then you've got to be thinking, you've got to be thinking food and what it is. And so people will call me up and tell me they have that, and my first question is, what's your ethnic background? Because we know in this, if you start from Oslo and get down to Crete, you go from about 2% milk intolerance to 99%. Greek Cypriots cannot drink milk. And so in Cyprus, for instance, they have yogurt standards instead of milk. So if you're an Ashkenazi Jew or an American Indian or a Philippine person, And you find that when you go out and run, you have diabetes, it's almost certainly milk product, ice cream, milk, something like that. But that's only one instance where you have lactates. You could have it simply from egg. I had a fellow that got these fantastic cramps after every marathon. And then he figured out he was carbo loading like everybody else. He carbo loaded with pizzas. Now he just had to figure out what was it in the pizza. And it turned out he was allergic to soybeans, or intolerant of soybeans. And this pizza chain, not identified, used soybeans as a meat expander. Fortunately, his 6-year-old son is allergic to soybeans. So he's used what might be the food that Daddy eats. The son was used to taste it. Check it out. Check out. So that seems to be, when we're dealing with runner's itch, we had the problem with runner's itch who was able with a food diary to pin it down to lobster, but lots of people find out it's due to egg or milk or wheat or something. And so this is only, I would say, the tip of the iceberg. I saw a recent report in the British Medical Journal about the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, the old psychosomatic problem. It turned out that they did a study with 21 people, and 14 of them were absolutely able to identify the food that caused it. And I think if you get into these things, you're going to find that these food intolerances is very high in these diseases. So that's one of the things. As far as the orthopedic problems, to put it into a little formula, there's a problem of genes, training, and environment. Again, we all practice this kind of medicine. When people come in, we want to know what their parents had. You know, what runs in your family. Well, bad feet run in families. I mean, if you've got a foot that's going to give you a problem, if you have a short leg, what Emerson once said, there's a crack in everything God made. Every runner brings some structural problem to the running. And then the training, because it overdevelops this posterior group of muscles versus the anterior group, produces lordosis and shortening that creates further pressures on the genetic weakness. And then the environment has to do with shoes and surface. So when you look at a disease of an individual, say, what do you do for Achilles tendonitis? Well, you've got to find out what was the specific weakness that made them susceptible, what type of training are they doing, and form. This has to do with running form. And then what about the shoes? Most running shoes are not made for people over 170 pounds. So those sort of things, these people are going to come in, and so you have to know all these. You can see how intricate it gets. You see, I'm kind of semi-retired, and I'm a cardiologist, but since I've been into running, I find that I haunt the library. And I find that I have to talk to every specialist on our staff, that I know more about hematuria than the urologists. I quote them articles that they are not even aware of. You see, for instance, we do get one of the diseases of excellence, unfortunately, is hematuria. And if you had hematuria, your first inclination, I'm sure, is to check out your urine, then get a pyelogram. And then you might, if you were obsessive enough, I'd say, submit to a cystoscopy. But usually that comes kind of late in the game. You've thought about it for a long time. You've discussed it with family and friends and a bartender before you agree to it. By that time, we've discovered that the cause of most hematuria is gone, which is bruised bladder. And that was found in the Royal Navy, where when they tell you they're going to do a cystoscopy, they do it, that's all. And not only did they do the cystoscopy, but this guy Blacklock did them daily, so that he was able to follow the progress of this bladder ecchymosis. However, there was a Japanese study where these were all negative, the arterial glands were negative, everything was negative
So what you have to do in running is you've got to have the scope of all. I think I started to think about diseases of excellence, and I think there are something like 23 medical specialties, and I can't think of one specialty that wouldn't have to see a runner or two for some reason. So those are the two practical reasons that you would, even if you never thought of using exercise in the treatment and prevention of disease, just sitting in your office, you would have to know just so that you would be able to handle what was coming in, not having any input or any feeling of advocating exercise. Now, however, if you want to practice what I like to think of as true holistic medicine, you have to use exercise. Now, I don't mean holistic medicine in the sense that we hear a lot about. I think most doctors have an inborn distrust of holistic medicine. One fellow has written that holistic medicine brings up ideas of purple-colored Zen robes and mantras and macrobiotic diets. And he said, last but not least, the entire state of California. So I believe that, see, they have appropriated all the good words, but we have always been holistic. We've been taught to treat the patient, treat the whole patient. Now, if you're going to treat the whole patient and employ the resources inside the patient, you have to use exercise. And so, in order to make that clear, I would say we have to recall the difference between disease and illness. Once we do know that, but the last time we don't verbalize, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know, but I'd like to have you reconsider this idea that disease is a biological event. It is a very scientific sort of statement about what is the matter with the patient. It's something you can see on an X-ray or in a biopsy. You know, it's clearly evident. You insert a dye and you take X-rays and you can see the coronary artery obstruction. That's disease. Now, what is illness? Illness is the impact that this disease has on the individual's life. Because this fellow's coronary artery is obstructed, he can't walk to the end of the room here. 2, he is out of work. 3, his physical work capacity is down, his oxygen uptake is diminished, and then all his psychological tests are reduced. His self-image is in the basement somewhere, can't have sex with his wife. I mean, his life is destroyed, and that is the illness. That is a completely different thing than the vessels. Now, if you're going to discuss the treatment of coronary artery disease, you've got to discuss surgery. Because there's nothing going to change that constriction. All those arteries are there, and that's there. It's an accomplished fact. And all the medications we have are not going to change it. And pretty much most of the diseases we have are in that status. We deal with chronic disease that cannot be reversed. It may be retarded, can't be reversed. Arthritis, hypertension, multiple sclerosis, name it. We're dealing with people who cannot be cured. That disease is evidenced by pathology. There are changes in structure, and what we're dealing with really is trying to extend their lifespan. We're thinking in terms of longevity. Now, illness is a completely different thing. It's kind of like a play or a novel. We're stepping in. What can we do about this individual's life in so much as it is impossible now, by definition, dealing with chronic disease and cure. And so when we deal with illness, we're dealing with that impact, and therefore we have, in order to reduce the impact, we have to do something to the individual without changing the disease. Now, many proponents for exercise claim that they can change the disease. They can prevent it, ameliorate it, improve it. And that is one of the reasons why exercise has a bad name. Most doctors don't believe it. And their actions go along with that belief. The reason exercise is not being utilized completely is because it has been proposed as something that treats disease. Whether it can or not, I'm not going to argue, because I think it is that argument that has polarized the medical community and prevented most doctors from movement. So that when you get into cardiac rehab, you find that doctors that propose this sort of thing end up being the major source of patients in that program. Because the patients are self-referred, the other doctors don't believe it. You're not going to believe that any time, no matter how many times you run around the block, there's going to be any change in that, those coronary, those plaques in your coronary artery. So it's this whole attention to disease that has limited the use of exercise. If instead we started to look at the patient, not the disease, and we started to think in terms of the function of the patient, we started to think of today, not tomorrow. What can we do for this patient today? You see, and got into physiology and not pathology. Then we would see the major reason for using exercise. People say to me, will exercise increase your longevity? I said, I don't know. Well, we'll never be able to prove that. The protocol is so involved and so confused and so prolonged, we'll never be able to prove that. But I'd say it can double your life expectancy. Now, how can it double your life expectancy? Because you take your life as you're living it today. I don't know how many years you live in, but see, you have 24 hours a day in your life. Now, 8 hours you spend at work. That leaves you 8 hours for another life. Most people don't have another life. They come home at 5 o'clock and lapse into a semi-coma that's interrupted by food and sometime in front of TV. What happened to me when I started running at 45, I'm now 65, I got 20 more years of life. I lived 40 years in the last 20. Because now, well, you can see, I'm here. I wouldn't be here. I'd be somewhere, maybe planted, I don't know. But I'd be somewhere with my feet up doing nothing. This is what we want to deal with. Life, what do you expect out of life today? You know, the funny thing, when I was in Staten Island, I was talking about this with my son's thing. And Peter had never heard me talk before. He was very nervous about what would happen. So I'm going to sit in the back of the room, and so that's all right. So anyway, we sat up front, watching my every move. And so I got to this thing, and I was saying, well, all we have is 24 hours. we spend 8 hours at work, and that leaves us, you get like this, you know, I mean, you get a little, I was having this trouble with 8 from 24. And I was saying that leaves us, and I look down, and Peter's looking up and he's saying, 60? So I'll make this a little more clear. At Mayo Clinic about 6 years ago, they took 10 cardiacs with proven coronary arterial disease and put them on an exercise program for a year. Then repeated the arteriograms. No change. Now, the immediate reaction then is exercise has no role in the treatment of coronary artery disease. Now, Victor Froelich, who runs a cardiac rehab and admits a lot of these things, that we get very much more sophisticated methods. We're going to show for changes that justify saying it does change the disease. Well, let's admit that it does change the disease. What about the patients? What about the illness? These patients had all reduced their medication, some were off it. These patients were all back to work, none had been employed before that. All of their physiological tests were improved. Their physical work capacity, their maximal aerobic capacity, and all their psychological tests were improved. So you see what had happened, while the disease had not changed one whit, the impact of the disease hadn't changed extremely. And so we see that when I go in a race, you know, I'll be in a race and I'll find there are any number of people in these races that have heart disease, that have lung disease, that have kidney disease, that have all sorts of diseases. And their disease has not been changed by what's happened. I'm sure Joe Michaels, who ran from Montreal to Long Island City, that if they did arteriograms on that, they haven't changed since he started running. But he is in the best shape of anybody in this whole little town. And he can function better now than people who are presumably healthy. What we have to realize is the change that can occur. You take what's happening with the Pritikin regimen. The Pritikin regimen works. I mean, people come into that sort of diet, exercise regimen, and they go, what happens is that their function improves. Pritikin says he's improving the pathology. Nobody will ever listen to him when he keeps on with that. What he can show is that you take people in there that are hypertensive, that are diabetics, and in a period of 2 to 3 weeks, he has their weight down, he has them functioning, and they're off medication. Why is that? Well, if you listen to Pritikin and you argue with people who are favored, all you hear is the diet. But those people are going out and walking 2 miles after each meal. They walk 2 miles after breakfast, 2 miles after lunch, 2 miles after supper. What's happening with them is happening to their physiology and their function. We know Bjorntrop, who's one of these Scandinavians, done a lot of work on hypertension and diabetics and obesity, and what he talks about is not only the physical rehabilitation in the physiology, but the metabolic rehabilitation in their function. So all these changes that occur with your blood lipids and your glucose tolerance and your hypertension occur because of the physiology. You're not changing disease here. You're changing the entire metabolic state of this individual, physiological state. And so you can see it's this little parochial thing that goes on with specialists. Why would a urologist faced with a guy with benign prostatic hypertrophy suggest to him that he get on a walking program? You know, that wouldn't even cross his mind. He's treating a prostate. He's not treating an individual. That's for someone else. His wife should suggest that, not me. But we are. I mean, sometimes I once said I was a cardiologist because I wasn't intelligent enough to be a general practitioner. I think that the specialization we have has so focused us down to this sort of thing, we don't see that we're treating people. And that's where, you see, when I was talking before here about this cardiac rehab is too valuable for sick and cardiacs. Everybody should be admitted to rehab, whatever their disease. And similarly, when people get sick, there's a healthy way to be ill. There's a healthy way to be. Pritikin, I think, is the first one that's come down and shown the real benefit of exercise. The problem, you see, then he thinks that he's doing something for the disease. As soon as you get that out of your mind and you see what you're doing is really doing something for the patient, you're taking individuals who are restricted. Most people think they're unfit because they are disadvantaged and handicapped by their disease. So do the doctors. They're unfit because they have obesity and arthritis and heart disease and pulmonary disease and all that. It's not so. They're disadvantaged because they're unfit. All you need, you see, is for this to happen in these great muscles of yours in order to improve your function. And since this all occurs in the muscles, all you have to do is have a set of muscles. You don't need a good heart. With the same amount of blood going from this lousy heart, when you get a good set of legs, then you can do 3 or 4 times the amount of physical work capacity. We can prove that. So we have these people coming in, we run the aerobic rehab thing. We don't limit it to cardiacs. We don't even know who the cardiacs are. We don't do stress tests. We don't take pulses. We got this down so simple. We got it so simple that anybody could. We could be run by a high school kid. And we walk in, and the common thing that is occurring to our patients is that they're getting great legs. I walked in the other day and I saw Ed Fair. He'd been in about, I guess he'd been with about 12 weeks. I said, Ed, you got great legs. And that's what happens. You get great legs, and then you don't need anything else. We have one guy who's on dialysis. He doesn't even have kidneys. hemoglobin's about 6 grams. This guy, and we got him going, and he's got great legs. And so this 6 grams of hemoglobin now allows him to walk and walk and walk. Let me take one more, for instance, just to show you what I'm talking about. Take a guy with intermittent claudication who can walk maybe 50 yards, 40 yards, 100 yards, whatever. And you do arteriograms on that individual. You're going to see this basic arterial disease. Then you put them on a walking program. This has been shown time and time again. An exercise program. You're going to increase their walking. And this is why Pritikin thinks his diet is doing it. No, it's that walking is doing it. Because at the end of that time, when now he's able to walk 4 or 5 times as far, you repeat the arteriograms, that doesn't change at all. Why is he being able to walk? Because that small trickle, little trickle of oxygen that came down is now being used by muscles that are so efficient that they can do 3 or 4 or 5, 6, walk indefinitely with the same amount of oxygen they didn't allow them to walk before. It's all occurring here. You can show that with muscle biopsy. All this is problematic. All this is problematic. I don't even care if it's Ken Cooper or Bruce or you name the people, Helstein, whoever, talking about using cardiac rehab and changing cardiac disease is still problematic. This is not. This is QED. It's been proven, as Roy Shepard said, ad nauseum, that you can take any age, male or female, from 10 to 80, and put them on a program of 30 minutes at a comfortable pace 4 times a week, and inside of 12 weeks show this improvement in physiology, function, etc., and improve their life expectancy. That's the thing. This is the wonder drug of the 80s. And it's going to be the thing that you'll be able to use on every patient that comes in. You know, sometimes I go out and say, I'm detailing a new drug. It's called exercise. It had practically no contraindications, no side effects, except for these little things. And it is compatible with most other drugs. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sure there's but that in basic is the message I want to present to you. That there are really 4 reasons for studying exercise physiology. The 2 are very self-serving reasons in order just to appear knowledgeable and not stupid when somebody walks in the office. And if the other 2 reasons have to do with practicing total medicine and treating the patient as well as your tiny little specific orientation toward the body, whether it's the sinuses or the prostate or the fallopian tubes or whatever. So maybe we've got exactly 37 seconds to close, but maybe it's a Saturday morning. Maybe we could spend a few minutes in questions. I'd like. Yes.
You mentioned that some exercise programs recommend 3-4 times a week for a specific period of time.
Yeah.
Physiologically, we sleep 6 to 8 hours every 24 hours, 7 days a week. Why would the exercise program be recommended 3 to 5 times a week when it would seem to me that exercising 7 times a week would be better, be more physiological? In other words, can you get more benefit, as far as you can tell, from exercising on a daily basis or twice daily basis than you would, let's say, 3 times a week?
Yeah, I think that obviously competitive athletes have found that half hour, 3 or 4 times a week is going to put them in competitive shape. The fitness programs tend to be individual. And there are some people that find that they exercise 7 days a week, they get exhausted. And one of the whole basis of these things is to listen to your body. And if you've ever run on a track team, you know there's always an animal on the track team that will destroy everybody else. If the coach may key the whole squad on some guy that can go out and train twice a week indefinitely, twice a day indefinitely. So you have to go along with your body. I frankly believe with you that this this 2-hour-a-week minimum isn't anywhere near. Now that I've gotten into this aerobic rehab, I would like to go more and more to the Pritikin thing. Pritikin, in his new hospital schedule, has 3 months in the 3 months, 3 hours in the gym in the morning and 3 hours after supper. He's got this idea that you shouldn't exercise on an empty stomach, which my body doesn't agree with. But I agree. I think that the more the better, obviously. But there is a point where you get exhausted and stale, and you've got to be listening to that. And there are ways of following. I didn't mention, and I'd like to, is that what we're dealing with are things that we always did before we got cars and indoor plumbing and TV sets and that sort of thing. And the Breslows in 1972 in UCLA studied a number of healthy people. Now, I don't know how many they studied, but assume that since they are sociologists that they studied a significant sample. And they found that good health, good, vibrant, zestful living was associated with these 7 rules. And I think you'll recognize them as those followed by your grandparents. I mean, before we turn to conversational types, ways of making a living, and how to use your body. The first was eat a good breakfast. Now, my grandfather was a farmer. He was dead before I was born, but they always used to tell stories about what kind of breakfast they had. I couldn't believe it. I mean, they'd have pie and steak and everything for breakfast. And when you go around the country, you find little remnants of this. In Scottsdale, they have the cowboy's breakfast. And in Anaheim, they have the trucker's breakfast. And in Minnesota, they have a farmer's breakfast. It's always steak and eggs. Steak and eggs. That's the, after that, I go to Pritikin. Have your steak and eggs. But wherever there's heavy work being done, and when you start getting into a fitness program, and you got this 7 days a week, and you're putting that load, and you're using up that energy, you need that good breakfast, and that's what these people do. Because the 7th rule, I'm not going to keep it, is to exercise regularly. These people exercise regularly. And the other 6 just led up to that. The second one was don't eat between meals. Breslow's translated these into don'ts, but they found out that people didn't. But when you eat a breakfast like that, you don't even think about eating anymore. I go right through lunch. You see. Lunch is just a talk. Anyway, when you spend 4 hours by yourself, you want to meet someone. So that's fun. Anyway, nothing between meals. Now, the other thing they found was maintain your weight. Now, that's interesting because this was in 72. And you know, when you say maintain your weight, what do you mean by maintain your weight? Well, I'm maintaining my weight. That means it hasn't changed in the last 6 months or something. But you see, I'm in a program in St. Louis, and this is the same thing. Washington University of St. Louis on aging, and I am being with 15 other runners. And the reason they're using me and these 14 other guys is that we ran in school. And so they matched us with 15 people who were still running in school. Naturally, in those days, nobody was interested in running. Now they are. So I matched with a 20-year-old 422 mile, which was what I was in college. And what they found is that that was say 20, and now I'm 60. They did about 60. What I had lost was 15% of my VO max in those 40 years. And now, what were the rules? One was maintain your weight. I had to weigh the same as I was when I was 20. Maintain your training. Well, when I was 20, we didn't train that hard. And so I did. And the third thing was the same health status. So those 3 simple things, and I found that in those ensuing 40 years, I was only 15% below my peak. So, but the Breslows had already told us that. So when you're looking to see what you should weigh, don't look at the Metropolitan Life Scale. Remember what you were when you were last in Anchorage. See, or that would be, say, the day you got married, that's the way. Got out of basic or got out of school. So maintain your weight. Then don't smoke. Well, it turned out that people are healthy, don't smoke. That's okay. No more comment on that. I never got tough about smoking. I think if you do these other things, you don't smoke. And what was the whole, drink moderately. How about that?
again, the Breslau's were ahead of their time. You say, in 72, people didn't think you should drink moderately. Now we know more and more studies have shown that 2 drinks a day, people seem to live longer than people who abstain and people who drink 4. For a reason we don't know, except Breslau's people did that. And we found out with runners, Peter Wood found that 30 to 40 mile a week runners don't smoke. Almost to a perfect man don't smoke, but they drank. Not a great deal, but they drank. No hard liquor, but they drank. Okay, so those were, then finally was get a good night's sleep. I find these very interesting rules because you see, Breslau made the rules, but they're really observations. And what is a good night's sleep? I don't think the Breslaus really understood this. I'm beginning to understand it more and more because I'm 64. People who are elderly are supposed to have bad night's sleeps. See, and there's no sense. The good night's sleep is in the eye of the beholder, kind of. And I found that out, and I think I understand what's going on here. What a good night's sleep means that you are in good psychological health, that's all. It has nothing to do with the hours you spend sleeping or anything else like that. Like having wires in your head and going to these sleep laboratories. Sleep laboratories are, you know, I remember Isidore Snapper once used to say, esophagoscopy is the most useless of all procedures. It isn't anymore, but I think it was then. I think sleep laboratories are the second option. Anyway, what I found out as I got older, and they say, well, older people don't sleep well. They have trouble getting to sleep, and then their sleep is interrupted. Well, what I found was, because I tend to, like last night, I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight, not here. I'm sorry, I'm going to give my last one talk. But I was thinking last night about what I was going to say, and I was intensely interested in this, and the next thing you know, I fell asleep. But fortunately, because I'm elderly, my sleep is interrupted, and about 2 hours later, I had to get up and go to the John. And then I had another opportunity, you see, to think about when you're awake during the night. That makes a difference. So here, you see, are the rules that all you have to do is apply to the people sitting in front of you. And the basic thing starts here. It's regular exercise. And you can see, if you look at it, it's just what your grandparents did before we got it. When we were still peasants, we did this. When we were doing a full day's work and exercising that way, and maintaining our weight and not abusing our bodies. So it's as simple as all that. Yes?
What are your feelings about diet? Are you oriented more toward exercise and you play down diet somewhat? What are your feelings about diet?
I think, I believe that we eat too much fat. I believe I eat too much fat. What I've found from running is that you have to replace carbohydrates. That there is 100 calories of carbohydrates used up in your running, and that you've got to replace those. And I think they should be done by, I think Pritikin's right on a lot of things. I believe in complex carbohydrates. I believe the insulin dragon should be kept asleep. You've got to sneak the carbs in without arousing the insulin guy to come up and drive your blood sugar down. Because I've had I believe in hypoglycemia because I've had several episodes in running. If you take a pure, straight sugar about an hour before running and then go out and run, you find out what hypoglycemia feels like. Complete and utter exhaustion and incoordination. Now, Pritikin has the fat content low. It doesn't feel good to me. And besides, I like eggs. So I have my 2 eggs in the morning, and then I usually go on with the complex carbohydrates and low fat. And I think the Framingham study has shown that in a free living situation, egg eaters don't have high cholesterol, or any higher than anybody else. Your body makes that adjustment. One thing that happens with runners is that they tend to get, consciously or unconsciously, more particular about their eating. They tend to eat more fish, more poultry, less red meat, whatever that means, less fat. And so, since you become more and more animal and you listen to your body more, I tend to follow those dictates of what my body says. So that's about what I think. I think what I want to do is maintain my percent body fat, which is about 9%. So I lower my food requirements to maintain that, but at the same time I have to maintain the amount of energy to go out and run 30 or 40 miles a week. So your diet is that compromise. And I like the idea of having really good breakfast. I'm kind of an eclectic. I pick and choose. But I think complex carbohydrate, low fat, and I'm really it. I eat a lot of salt, but I don't think that's a factor. I think you have to look at your family background. If there's coronary artery disease in my background, I'd be more likely to be careful about cholesterol. If there's hypertension in the family, I'd be more likely to be concerned about salt.
In your particular situation, a pretty tight diet wouldn't give you enough energy to run as much as you do. Like you could.
Pretty good diet will give you enough energy, but I just like I tend not to function as well through the morning on just carbohydrates. One of the problems with runners is that a lot of them get a hypoglycemic symptoms and they're put on a high protein diet and they can't run on that. You cannot run on a high protein, low carbohydrate diet. And so I believe this whole trend in diet moving to more carbohydrates, more complex carbohydrates, more fibers than they're doing in diabetics is absolutely the way to go with diet. I think that's more or less the way we used to eat. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the disadvantages of a beta blocker?
The beta blocker?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it lessens cardiac output, and see, we think mainly of the cardiac effects, but it has peripheral effects too. And the muscle. All those great things that are happening in the muscle are also affected by the beta blocker. Plus, peripheral circulation is cut down. You get some decrease in peripheral circulation. So this combination of lowering the output and slowing the rate, and then decreasing peripheral circulation, and then you interfere with glycogen metabolism. And you know, you can go into hypoglycemia with beta blockers, and it's happened with running. So they shouldn't be the first line of defense in hypertensives. I mean, you got to be thinking of something else. And I guess the alpha blockers might work, or capitan. I'm not happy with diuretics either.
You are in fact saying that it does reduce endurance.
It does. Well, it reduces exercise tolerance. There can be an extreme reduction.
One of the problems that I see in people who want to get in shape is that so much press has been given to people who run a job that a lot of people feel the only way to get in shape is to run a job.
Yeah.
What do you
advise? Well, see, if all we want to do is train those muscles, we want to get those big changes that I mentioned over here in the muscle. Now, so what you got to do is that you for 30 minutes at a comfortable pace. That's the fitness formula. Now, 4 times a week. Now, what's the mode? Well, the mode can be then anything from cycling, swimming, jogging, walking, cross-country skiing. And when I first started, I thought that the reason that we wanted to use all these big muscles is because it worked the heart better. Actually, the bigger the muscle, then the more of the factory is influenced, and the more muscle cells will be involved in all these functions, the increase in myoglobin, capillaries, and enzymes, and all that. So the mode then can be any of these, and cross-country skiing, since you use both your upper and lower extremity, or these new Schwinn bicycles where you use your arms and your legs, they're even more economical than combining it. I frankly, with cardiacs, would prefer to stay with the walking program because one of the Spanish philosophers once said that only the sick and the ambitious are in a hurry. And that's the trouble with cardiacs. They are sick and they're ambitious. And it's not that they can't run, but they run an 900 mile an hour
So walking is equally good enough. Yes.
You related diet or food intolerance to diarrhea accumulation.
Yeah, right.
Do you see any relationship between food intolerance and joint
Yes,
musculoskeletal?
yeah. Well, you read continuing literature of studies being done, for instance, in rheumatoid arthritis and people who can't handle milk or cheese or whatever it is. You got, but it takes a Sherlock Holmes to pin these things down, and it's very, very difficult unless you go into some really rigid elimination type diet to focus in on things. You've got to keep a food diary. My own feeling is, get this story from running. I only get it if I run 10 miles, or I get it every time I run 10 miles, I get it, or every time I go to a race, I get it, so that it is intensity related, but it occurs every time you do that intensity. Then it's got to be something that you take every day, and then almost invariably it's something after breakfast. It is the only kind of formula meal. Most people eat exactly the same breakfast.
Have you had experience where, with that type of person, where they eliminated a particular food in their joints problem?
Yes, yeah, reduced. But I think that when you have a joint problem like that, you've got a disease has a constellation of causes, you say, and there are other stressors that can cause it. The climate, the exhaustion, it's like migraine. You can trigger it, but you've got the basic problem there, and there are a number of triggers. Yes?
What about hemorrhoids in runners? I've discovered that to be the kind of hidden problems. Why would a runner have a chance to develop hemorrhoid problems every now and then?
Yeah, yes and no. Yeah, I've had that. I've been told that mountain climbing is much more prevalent than mountain climbing. They say if you're at 20,000 feet and it's 10 below zero and things, you're liable to ignore the call of nature. And that's I think that mostly runners complain of diarrhea, of loose stool rather than constipation. Yes.
Do you think there's enough data present at this time to produce a textbook that deals with running that would help people in the medical field to better understand it and treat people?
Well, I think that Costle's the scientific basis of distance running has a lot of no speculation, all facts, and he's a clinical physiologist who's dealing with the athlete. That's a really good book. And what's needed is this book on the disease, what I call a disease of exercise-induced disease is what we really need. The basic exercise physiology is there to be dug out. And perhaps there's only one book I know on the use of exercise in a variety of diseases. That's Cantu's book he's up in New England. Mostly the little pockets. For instance, out of Wisconsin, where they have that cardiac rehab, they are now taking diabetics. They said there's evidence that exercise helps diabetes. You see, it's that kind of, when you make a statement like that, everybody's kind of gets up and say, well, what is the evidence? And I don't believe it. And I think the approach should be that exercise may be good for diabetes, but it's very good for diabetics. And that's generally, that would be a general statement you would put in front of the running text, but it's that approach. Exercise physiology, by definition, is the study of the functioning muscle. If you just got that over, I think it's a little late for people who are already in practice, but I'm associated with the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, and we're going to initiate there, come September, a curriculum where exercise will go through the entire 4 years. It will begin in freshman year with exercise physiology and exercise biochemistry. In second year, they're going to have the pathology of exercise, and then the third and fourth year, they'll have its use in clinical practice. And I think that's the sort of thing we need.
You could have postgraduate things too as well.
I don't know. I'm excited about that. I've looked in the JMA for those postgraduate courses, but I never have one. See, they get bogged down in the sports medicine, and that's orthopedic surgery as far as well, I've kept you people much too long. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, Sam.
Somebody told me, he said,
I tell you what, it'd be better if you went outside and come in another set of doors. Thank you.
But I'm one of the
statement or carry a banner around? 15 minutes, yes.
Did you book that one?
New book. No, the new book will be out, I guess, in May, I think. And it's primarily about lifestyle, fitness. Not too much nuts and bolts, but actually it's divided into two parts. Well, the first part is called the human machine. How to operate the human machine. Have you ever looked at your warranty? It's like kind of like Bucky Fuller's one of the instruction manual for Spaceship Earth. And then the second part is called the athletic experience, which is, I think, an interesting concept that people have never really analyzed the athletic experience into component parts. Play. People tend to confuse play and sport, for instance. They're two very, very vitally different things. Nothing pressing.
Just curious, my throat gets dry. You ever suck on hard candy, recommend anything? What do you do when you're running?
Yeah, most runners don't get dry throats unless they run indoors, like in an army meet or something like that. We used to use chew gum before the race. I suppose, you know what you do? You bring that up at a large group meeting. I always hope that somebody will write to me and say, oh, I got a dry throat, this is what I do. If I try to look it up in a medical journal, I'm not going to find it anywhere. You wonder why some people get it and some people don't. I mean, efficient in saliva. Is it due to an allergic reaction? I don't know. I think you've got to experiment around because you're not going to get help from any scientists.
Well, do you see any problem in sucking on hard candy or popping white tea or your mouth, something like that?
Yeah, I could see problems.
Good choke, I guess.
You could choke. It could come out your nose. It could, you know, it isn't until you find out. I was wondering about falling around with false teeth one time. You see, those things are experiential. If I was a teacher, I'd say, come back next week and report to us what you discovered. One fellow wrote to me who had exercise induced asthma and wondered about getting a mask. I had written to get a mask. Well, where could he get a mask? And I said, look, a fifth grade teacher giving this assignment for a class would the next day have had any number of ideas about how to warm the air when you're out running. So I think in this instance, you might find, just kind of think, there used to be a gargle that we used in chicken pox that we used for the sore mouth that might keep it. I don't know. It's a kind of an interesting brainstorming thing, but there's nothing in the books for it. All life is a negotiation. And mostly we just think there's one answer, and in all negotiations, there's all kinds of things. You've got to negotiate with that throat of yours that says, no, you can't go that fast or I'm going to get dry. Maybe if you wore a mask, you breathe into a mask for 3 times. That'd be a good idea. But I have no idea because I haven't had it myself. We're just kind of fooling around for a few minutes, hoping somebody will ask me a question.
You experience sciatic when you first started?
I experience sciatic every day.
Is that right?
Yes. Still do, right?
You don't get over it.
Do you get over it? Yes, and then it comes back. Once you've had a bad back, you've got a bad back. And so there, I would say this about backs generally, I'd say this about injuries generally. From the knee down, they do the things that happen in the foot strike. And but from the knee up,
and specifically your sciatica, I think it's a question of the position of the pelvis. Either tilted this way, one leg is short on the other. It doesn't have to be a great deal. Or tilting forward. So usually you use a heel lift. Heel lift and or the appropriate back exercise. A lot of YMCA's now have what they call a healthy back program. And they're worth going to, mainly because they teach you how to do the exercise. And that's the key. The exercise is standard, but mostly people do them wrong. And the second thing is kind of like joining AA. Because you're in this group of facts. You know, and you can exchange atrocity stories with them. And you learn how they sleep. I sleep in a Barca lounger or something like that. Little tips on how to live with the back. But usually runners, it doesn't hurt you when you run. It only hurts after.
What about this inversion?
Never tried that. No, I'm not sure about that. So I've had some people come up and say it really worked like magic. Worth trying. But I think when inversion is something like a chiropractic manipulation, and it probably lasts for 2 or 3 days. Well, if they have the inversion, then you can get it in every day, I guess. But the thing to do is to get straight through the manipulation and then develop the girdle of muscles to keep you in the sand and the heel lift to keep you in the right position.
What's the name of Andrew's knee down category?
From the knee down, the problem is usually due to foot strike. And that means either a structural weakness in the foot or postural weakness due to muscle imbalance. I think the key there is you got to start with a really good shoe. What's a really good shoe? Well, I'm into the Excalibur GT Tigers. I think they're a really good shoe. Because they have this plug here that keeps you from pronating. And it has a pretty high heel, you can see compared to there. And it's got a pretty good heel count. So what all this does is it blocks the foot when you land, it keeps it from moving. And that's a good start. It may not be the whole thing, but that's a good start. We're going to have the official program here right now.
I'm sure y'all rather hear him talk than me, right?